Freeman's verbal guidance is dedicated to helping people awaken the power of their own mind through motivation, conscious thinking, inner healing, spiritual wisdom, and personal transformation. This channel explores mindset, manifestation, self-belief, peace, healing, and the limitless potential within all of us. Your mind is more powerful than you realise. Hi, welcome back into the channel for episode 3 on some teachings that I learned from Stuart Wilde and the Little Money Bible. You can find the Little Money Bible on audiobook on Master Key Society. There's plenty of books on there that you can listen to, and I'm sure you can buy them in places, but I like to listen to stuff. So I just want to pass my knowledge forward and educate you on money and what it is and how you can attract it into your life. So in this session I want to go even deeper into this idea that money is energy. Yeah, because the truth is most people are not struggling only financially, they are struggling emotionally. And emotional exhaustion, it affects every area of life. When people live in constant fear and stress around money, the nervous system rarely gets a chance to rest. The mind becomes overwhelmed with survival thinking. As in, what if I fail? What if I lose everything? What if nothing changes? What if I'm not enough? And over time, those thoughts don't just stay in the mind, they begin affecting the body. You know, the emotions, the confidence, the decisions, and even the identity of the person. And that's why financial fear can feel so heavy. Because underneath money worries, there is often something deeper. It may be fear of insecurity, fear of rejection, fear of not being valued, fear of losing control, fear of uncertainty. And uncertainty is difficult for the human mind. Most people want guarantees, but life rarely gives complete certainty, doesn't it? You know, so the real challenge becomes learning how to remain emotionally centered even when life is changing around us. That is true inner strength. It's not pretending that problems don't exist, but it's refusing to let fear completely dominate the mind. And this is where emotional energy becomes so important, because whatever emotion we repeatedly feed often grows stronger. You see, if a person constantly feeds hopelessness, comparison, shame, fear, then those emotional states become familiar pathways in the brain. But when someone slowly begins practicing gratitude, calmness, self-belief, and emotional awareness, new pathways start forming. You know, this is why mindset work matters. Not because it magically solves everything overnight, but because it changes the internal environment from which a person lives. And your internal environment affects your external behaviour more than most people realise. For example, a fearful person may avoid opportunities, avoid conversations, avoid risks, avoid growth. Not because they lack intelligence, but because fear convinces them that they will fail before they've even begun. Fear shrinks possibility, but confidence expands it. Now, confidence doesn't mean never feeling afraid. Real confidence often means moving forward despite the fear, trusting yourself enough to keep growing. And that's important because many people are waiting to feel completely fearless before taking action. But life rarely works that way. Growth usually happens while uncertainty is still present, and something else happens when people constantly live in lack mentality. Their focus narrows. They begin noticing only problems, only obstacles, only limitations, only what is missing. And the mind becomes conditioned to search for more evidence of lack. But what we consistently focus on emotionally often becomes our dominant experience. That is why awareness is so powerful, because awareness interrupts unconscious patterns. Instead of automatically feeling fear, we can pause and ask ourselves, why am I repeatedly telling myself every day this or that? What am I telling myself every day? Be conscious of that, because the subconscious mind listens constantly, especially to emotional filled thoughts. You know, if someone's repeatedly saying, I'm always struggling, nothing ever changes, I'll never succeed, the subconscious slowly accepts those statements as truth, and eventually the person begins living from that identity. But identity can change. Human beings are not fixed. Yeah, we change, we flow. People can heal. People can grow. People can rebuild. And you can transform. And often transformation begins quietly, with small daily changes. A different thought, a calmer reaction, a healthier habit, a moment of self-awareness. You know, tiny shifts repeatedly, consistently, can completely change the direction of your life. And this also applies to money. Because abundance is not always about dynamic and dramatic overnight success. Sometimes abundance begins with emotional stability. You know, when you've got clarity, discipline, you're making better choices, you've got healthier relationships, you have greater self-respect. These things create foundations, and your foundations matter. A strong foundation matters. You know, many people want external success without internal balance. But if the foundation is weak emotionally, success can become difficult to sustain. You know, and that's why emotional maturity matters alongside ambition. And another important thing to understand is this: there is nothing spiritual about hating money. Some people unconsciously believe that being spiritual means rejecting wealth completely. You know, the money itself is neutral. Money simply amplifies intention. Money can build hospitals, feed families, support healing, create opportunities, help communities, you know, support dreams. The problem is never money itself. The deeper issue is consciousness. How people think, how they behave, how they use what they have. And this is why healing our relationship with money matters so much. Because if someone secretly believes money is bad, they may unconsciously push it away or feel guilty receiving it. Especially people who help others. You know, many healers, creators, teachers, therapists, spiritual people struggle with this. Deep down they may believe, I shouldn't charge, I don't deserve abundance, helping others should mean sacrificing myself. But consistently sacrificing yourself emotionally often leads to exhaustion. So there has to be a balance. You know, giving and receiving are both part of healthy energy flow. And receiving it without guilt is something many people need to learn. Now, I also believe this. The way people treat themselves often mirrors the way they treat money. I know. The way people treat themselves often mirrors the way they treat money. So if someone is constantly neglecting themselves, criticising themselves, say disrespecting themselves, they may also struggle to manage energy, opportunities, or finances in healthy ways. Because self-worth influences behaviour. And behaviour shapes your outcome. That's why inner healing matters so deeply, not only for emotional peace, but for every area of life. Because when people begin healing internally, they often start making different decisions externally. Healthier decisions, clearer decisions, more empowering decisions. And slowly, life will change. Slowly, it begins changing. You know, it's not always instantly, not magically, but gradually. Like sunlight slowly rising after darkness. And maybe that is the message here tonight. That abundance is not simply about acquiring more. It's about becoming more conscious, more aware of your thoughts, more aware of your emotional patterns, more aware of the energy you carry every day. You know, because energy affects perception, and perception affects reality. So perhaps the real work is not chasing endlessly outside of ourselves, but learning how to create peace, clarity, and trust within ourselves first. Because a calm mind sees opportunities that a fearful mind will often miss. A peaceful heart makes wiser decisions than a panicked one. And a person who truly believes they are capable begins moving through life differently. You know, not perfectly, but differently. And sometimes that difference changes everything. So remember this, the greatest investment you'll ever make is not only financial, it is the investment you make into your own mind, your own healing, and your own consciousness. So thank you very much for listening. Please come back for part 4, and I'll continue this and educate you on how you can start changing your life bit by bit and attracting, you know, the better stuff in. All right, because, you know, life is energy. We need to live in that vortex, and we need to get into that vibration, and it all starts from within. I couldn't stress that enough ever. It all starts from within. Self-healing. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I will come back with the next one soon. Bye.